Hello, everybody. This is Glenda with Fralins and Friends Crafts Plus. Tonight, I'm going to read an article that I recently wrote about labeling, and you'll see what I mean. Please do remember to share, subscribe if you haven't, and click the notification bell so you'll know when I've uploaded next, and give us a thumbs up, please. Thank you. The title of this article is Doc, Watch What You Say. In 1955, a baby girl born to expectant first-time parents had microcephaly. That is a condition where the fontanelles or soft spots in the skull are closed when they're born. With no surgery to correct the condition at the time, the parents were advised by the doctor to place their precious baby girl in a facility. She wasn't expected to ever walk, talk, or write her name, according to the doctor. So the parents, they couldn't bear to part with their baby, and they took her home, determined the doctor's prognosis wasn't correct. They worked with the child, and she flourished over the years into walking, verbal, high school graduate. Granted, she graduated from a special education program, but she went on to work under supervision and even marry. To me, this girl was and is to this day a dear friend. Whenever we meet, she immediately recognizes me, and I know it's her. As a child, I didn't notice the difference, and we'd enjoy swinging together, playing with dolls or whatever. Her father worked with my father and my grandfather on the farm, and so we had plenty of time to spend together. In the 1970s, a 4-year-old boy frustrated his family and the Sunday school teachers with his constant movement and noise. After taking him to a psychiatrist, the diagnosis given was hyperactive. ADHD wasn't even diagnosed back then. The accepted treatment at the time was Ritalin. It seemed to work at first, but after a few weeks, the condition became even worse than before. The parents made the decision to use behavioral modification instead. Short timeouts so he had time to calm down helped. Other helpful activities included anything with multiple parts like Legos, puzzles, and the like. When it came time to enter school, the government had to have a label to fund the extra help he needed to flourish at academics. The government didn't recognize hyperactivity then, so he was labeled behaviorally impaired. Though hyperactivity and later ADHD became recognized diagnoses, the school psychologist and system never changed the original label. The label followed him into adulthood. Yes, privacy is supposed to protect children, but face it, word gets around through other students and other people. The label follows him to this day. He's now in his mid-40s. He has a family. He works as a master welder and is pigeonholed as someone who could be undesirable by communities where he's lived. That man is my son. In the 1990s, I left a nursing career that I loved. I went through a terrible depression, and at other times I was absolutely full of energy. I was triggered by some incidents in a group I was involved with, and that helped to manifest the condition in me that I'd lived with all my life. I'd never known it as anything other than moodiness. The diagnosis was bipolar disorder. Hiding such a condition when you're in the worst part of depression and mood swings is all but impossible. The stigma that goes along with any emotional or mental illness issues causes barriers with jobs, expectations of others, friendships, and even my own perception of myself. I'm fortunate that medication stabilized my condition as long as I'm not around triggers that cause an anxiety attack or worse, depression. I'm fine. I've learned to use coping skills that help me to live a fairly normal life, even if I do have a trigger. I could hide behind the secrecy that many prefer by not speaking about it, by never telling anybody. I choose to go forward letting the public know about me and to see my accomplishments and educating them that it is a medical condition. That wasn't even accepted by the medical profession for a long time. It is a chemical imbalance in the brain that is nothing to do with how I am as a person. I'm a nice person. I'm not a danger. And I want the stigma to reduce, not only for me, but for others. These stories are not the only ones. They're a small drop in the bucket of labels that affect the lives of people who live with them every day. Do we need labels? Of course we do. But they need to come with education. If someone is diagnosed as diabetic, the public is pretty much informed as to the cause and don't expect anything less of the person as far as ability. I believe we can reduce labels to teach the public about what's real. Most of all, not everyone with a specific diagnosis or label reacts or has the same level of ability. Doctors need to be careful when they give a prognosis. Making assumptions about a person's future causes terrible damage if that person who's been labeled or people around them accept the prognosis as fact. I feel doctors should instead be much more positive and simply say, I don't really know. Everyone is different. Thank you for listening. And if I got a little tongue-tied, I apologize. I do sometimes when I'm reading. This is a very important topic to me because I've lived with one label or another. We've all lived with labels. Either that or we've got someone around us who has one of these labels that the public, the government, or somebody sees as undesirable or as to be pitied or as a heaven forsakes. That people put a death sentence on them. Not in a sense, it's like I have COPD. When I had my first breathing test, they came back with an approximate age that I would live to be. And it was about 20 years from when I was diagnosed. And I was like, don't tell me about that. By the way, I've passed that. They've come out with other medications that have helped. My energy is better some days than others. There's treatments that come out all the time. The big C, cancer, is not an immediate death sentence. Often cancer can be beaten, sometimes more than once, in the same person. I don't like it when people say, that's it, you're going to die in so and such amount of time. My mother-in-law was diabetic. I think she was type 1 diabetic. She'd been dealing with it almost her whole life. And it did attack almost all of her systems in her body over time. And she had some heart issues, and her kidneys were slowing down. They weren't functioning as well. There was a surgery she could have had done, but they said with her heart, she wouldn't survive the surgery. So they talked us into placing her into a skilled nursing unit where they could look after her, see to her needs. None of us really had the ability to do what she needed. However, they told us she'd live maybe 3 days, maybe 3 weeks at the absolute most. My mother-in-law lived 7 years there. The first half of that, she was very lucid. She knew what was going on. She managed to find a way to be happy through chatting with the nurses. She'd write poetry. As her eyesight got worse and worse, it would get slanted on the page, and she'd be off the lines and slanting it down the page, but you could read it. Several of those poems were submitted to the newspaper and published. Don't write someone off because of a label. Don't let someone else write them off because of a label either. You do need to listen to your doctors, don't get me wrong. But when they say, oh, you're going to die tomorrow, that's an extreme. Just say, hey, you don't know that for sure, do you? Most of the time they're going to come back and say, no, not really. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I love you all. Have a great tomorrow and a great night, and I love you. Be sure to smile and wave at somebody.